Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 98, and it's Holy Week Recovery Week on Anglican Unscripted. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And today's April 25th, 2014.
Okay, for most of our viewers who are watching off the YouTube channel, they're looking at a little red square that says subscribe in it. What's that for? Well, the reality is lots of people throughout the week email us to say, when's the next show? When's the next show? I want to know when the next show is. I'm bored. The wife wants me to do chores. Please, where is the next show? Well, if you click subscribe here, you will get an instant email message sent to you from YouTube the second I post a new show. Now, George and I have a problem. Our wives don't watch Anglican Unscripted. Said they would not really push the subscribe button, would they, George?
No, I don't think. Well, Susan likes the cat videos every so often and the bloopers at the end, but
that's about it. So, if you want to get an email message the second we publish a new episode of Anglican Unscripted, click the subscribe button, and YouTube will take care of the rest. George, let's move on to our first story. We took Holy Week off, so there's a little bit of news we need to catch up on. And we alluded last episode to an interview that Justin Welby did with LBC. I forget what the acronym stands for.
Leading Britain's Conversation.
Okay, and basically that's the NPR of Britain. And they sat down and they talked, well, they actually had a call-in show with Archbishop Justin Welby where people, the average citizen of Britain, got to call in and ask Justin Welby questions. Great theological questions like the kenosis came up and, well, no, and actually not. The only question on the minds of the average Briton is same-sex marriage and how soon till the church is going to be doing it. And his response back then, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, was the church can't go into same-sex marriage because Africans die when we do it. I stood on the gravesite of dead Africans in Sudan who were killed by Islamic Muslims over the issue of things like these. So we can't do it. He's gone on and he's done this North American tour now, George. Has he backed up? Has he been more forceful? What's his answer now on why the Church of England can't have same-sex marriages?
Well, he's begun to walk back the interview. That he's beginning to walk it back. He's beginning to sort of change and modify, and he's being a bit squirrely. In an interview with the Anglican Journal in Toronto, he was asked this question: are you saying the only reason why the Church of England doesn't go ahead with gay marriage is because it'll kill Africans? He said, well, yes, but... And he dropped the danger issue and said, really, the Anglican Church in Africa will never accept gay marriage, and so we really need to be cognizant of their feelings on this issue. But what he didn't do, and what he hasn't done in any subsequent interview, is say, is this right or is this wrong? Now, every morning at the breakfast table, I look my daughters up and down as they get up to go off to school, and occasionally I'll say to one of my daughters, Claudia, you can't wear that dress, it's too short. And if she will always say, why? Well, I learned long ago that I can't say because I say so. But if I say, well, because what will the neighbors think? That's the same argument Justin Welby is giving over gay marriage. We can't have gay marriage in the Church of England because the neighbors will get upset. Not whether it's right or wrong, not whether the dress is too short and has all these problems about what a good girl should wear, but rather what do the neighbors think? And that answer is unsatisfactory to a teenage girl, and I think the answer, as the Africans are being upset, that's unsatisfactory to the wider church world.
Well, it's
not an answer.
It's not. It's like we've wiped out the last 12 years of church history. There is no longer a Windsor Report. There's no longer a Lambeth 110, a Dramatine Statement, Dar al-Salam. All that has been wiped out. The church gave clear theological teaching in all those cases about what the church believes in regards to human sexuality. And now we've come down to, the Africans won't let us.
it's been harder to be an Anglican journalist over the past 4 or 5 years because at one time there were so many things going on, conferences and bishop statements and movements and all these things. I could always get Peter Akinola to say something or Henry Arambe and so on and so on. And Greg Venable's always good for a line. Well, when we were in Kenya, Kevin, when you and I were in Kenya for GAFCON, one of the things I noticed about the African prelates and primates was that they just were not that interested in things outside of their own immediate world, simply because they had been there, done that, and the whole Anglican International show had been a waste of time. Any agreement that they had reached with other primates, that Rowan Williams, for instance, didn't want to enforce, was just forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Windsor was a waste of time. Dramatine, Dar es Salaam, all these different conferences where these primates got together, spoke their mind, wrote down what they thought, communicated to the world that the Episcopal Church needed to be held accountable, went nowhere. So why continue? Why even speak up anymore? Now, GAFCON's speaking a little bit from the edges and making certain people know that there's still a voice for conservative Anglicanism in the church, but the reality is we need to adjust to talk about what Justin is saying. Justin is saying the only reason we can't have same-sex marriage in the Church of England is because of the Africans. So you're saying if we take the Africans completely out of the equation, that same-sex marriage is a fine and natural thing to do in regards to Lambeth 110, all the things that have gone on in tradition, reason, and scripture in the last 2,000 years. The only problem was the Africans.
Well, that's actually the issue that you see at the Anglican Consultative Council offices in London. They have fought the sex battle by introducing Indaba. And now, the GAFCON leaders, Eliud Wabukula and the other African archbishops, have said Indaba is a waste of time. It's a faux African movement that is designed just to wear us out. Yet, Justin Welby and the Anglican Consultative Council bureaucrats think, so long as we have these interminable talks that are done under false arguments, and we'll fly Africans first class to come to these conferences where they sit and listen to well-meaning Americans and Canadians explain why God is doing a special revelation to them over gay marriage. They think, well, look, we've got progress. No, you don't have progress. You're just throwing money into Band-Aid efforts that are being resented, dreadfully resented, by the great mass of African church leaders and Asian church leaders. And yet, Justin Welby and Western church leaders put all their faith into this Indaba joke. It's just a shame.
It is, because we need to be honest here. And George and I are about transparency and honesty. There is no longer an Anglican communion. That was torn up in 2003. It's not been repaired by the people who have the ability to repair it. Justin Welby would have the ability to hold churches that tore the fabric of the communion asunder and put it together if he wanted to. Be a defender of the faith, not a defender of secular society. I understand he works in a church state and there's all this mishmash and stuff he has to work with. But at the end of the day, he is a primate of the Anglican Communion and an archbishop of the Church of England. He's there to defend the faith. And your faith, your scripture, your tradition, your reason, anthropology, science are very clear as to why homosexual marriage is not godly. And homosexuality, where it may be a trait and some built-in desire that if you want to go born with, it needs to be dealt with as it should be dealt with. It is something that can be addressed by God and in many cases healed.
Well, Kevin, I'm going to say something that's going to flutter the pigeons and the dovecots. Just as the Anglican Communion is no longer a communion, the Episcopal Church, it's no longer a church. If by that you mean, can I, as a priest of the Diocese of Central Florida, be confident that I can go anywhere in that church and be received? And the answer is no. There are a number of dioceses that have told me that they will not receive me because of my theological views. I cannot be a priest in certain parts of the country. And there are priests in certain parts of the country who cannot be priests in the Diocese of Central Florida. They've been married 4 times, they're openly homosexual, you know. And so the sex wars have divided the Episcopal Church so that we're no longer a unified church. And I have to say, the women's ordination issue has divided ACNA because a priest in one part of ACNA is not a priest in another part of ACNA because of their gender. So, where am I going with this? We're all fallen.
Yes.
We're all broken. None of these institutions are perfect. But some of these institutions at least are trying to address these issues. Whereas the Archbishop of Canterbury just seems to think that if I can just keep dribbling the ball forward, just keep it rolling, just keep everybody on board, somehow the ship is going to arrive at eventually the destination, but by that time I'll be off of it and I don't have to worry anymore.
Yeah, it worked for Rowan Williams. I don't think it's going to work for Justin Welby. George, let's move on to story 2. Let me tell the audience that George and I may sound a little confused or off canter. We know what we're talking about. We've just taken 2 weeks off, and it takes a little while to get back into what we're doing. We just recorded 5 minutes of wonderful conversation without the record button on, so we're starting again. We had breaking news this week. It's breaking news for Anglicans. It's not for the Roman Catholic Church. We learned from David Knutson, that's his name, Keith Knutson?
Keith Newton.
Keith Newton. It's like a rock and roll name. Keith Newton, the head of the Anglican Ordinariate, that they are not seeing as many people swim the Tiber as they thought they would. Basically, for the last 2,000 years, the argument was, listen, the Roman Catholic Church would have more priests if we would allow for priests to be married, or if we made certain conditions where it's more palatable and more feasible and more loving to have a family-orientated priest. And this Anglican Ordinariate, in a way, offered that, where an Episcopal priest or an Anglican priest can still remain a priest, just join the Anglican Ordinariate, and you become a Roman Catholic married priest, happy-go-lucky, and all is well in the world. Mr. Knutson says it's not going that way, George.
No, there are only 1,500 lay members of the Ordinariate in England and about 80, 90 clergy. And Monsignor Newton basically is saying, it's just not happening. You know, we had such high hopes, we had such enthusiasm because we were combining the best, the liturgy, the traditions, the ethos of Anglicanism with the solidity and the doctrinal certainty of the Roman Catholic Church. And now you've got an institution that's smaller than Christ Church in Plano, Texas. Mm-hmm. It's why has it not taken off? And they're asking themselves this question. And I can offer some reasons that I, as an outsider, can see. And one of them is the Roman Catholic Church, outside of the circles that established it, Pope Benedict, has really tried to kill the Ordinariate. They don't want it to succeed. They've not put any money into it. They've not put any marketing into it. Most people have no clue it's out there. And they've allowed it to develop a reputation of a place where, well, if you're a cranky priest in the Church of England, as soon as you get your pension and you want to stick your finger in the eye of the church, you can join the Ordinariate. So it's a bunch of cranky old guys who don't like women. It's an unfair reputation, but nothing has been done to counter that.
Well, we don't want to tell them what the answer is or give them any solutions, but we do want to make note that this great innovative product of the Roman Catholic Church under Pope Benedict is not working, because the answer is not just allowing priests to marry and trying to get the outliers and the liberals and people who are unhappy with the Church of England to move into your branch of Catholicity. And so, it's interesting. It's a unique program. I'm sure some people who've swam the Tigris and who watched Anglican Unscripted are very pleased with moving down to Rome. But for the vast majority of Anglicans, they're Anglicans for a reason. They're Episcopalians for a reason. There is a doctrinal divide, and a lot of that is with the Pope and some other issues. And there's a reason we have Anglo-Catholics, is because we want to be Catholic in a way, but we want to maintain the Anglicans. There's no Catholic Anglicans, it's Anglo-Catholic. So I'm sure it's a further developing story that we'll talk about as time goes on. But yeah.
But Kevin, I really do think we need to address, I believe, like the issue. Monsignor Newton really truly believed, and the organizers really truly believed, that this was a solution. This was going to fill churches. And conservative movements in the United States and in England have just said, if we just do this institutional structural change, boom, that's going to make things happen. Here in Central Florida, if we just hold fast and just differentiate ourselves from the rest of the Episcopal Church, the people will come. Well, the people come because they moved to Florida, not because all of a sudden they think now is the time to join the Episcopal Church. The ACNA is growing, but it is not growing, I think, the way that its founders thought. Once we get rid of the baggage of Catherine Jefferts Schori and Gene Robinson and all the craziness, the sky's the limit. Well, it hasn't been. And I think we really need to say to ourselves, why have these conservative revival movements not taken off? Where's the Holy Spirit in all this?
Well, I think the ACNA's success has been a large part Catherine Jefferts Schori having that common enemy. The Anglican Ordinariate can't point to a common enemy. Rowan Williams, he's really a bad dude. Well, yeah, but he's not out there deposing priests left and right. I mean, he's just a druid. Yeah, that's all he is. Yeah, so it's interesting to see, and it's obviously a story we're going to cover more. Okay, we're going to throw Anglican news out for a segment. We have a distinguished attorney who's actually spoken before the Supreme Court and defended a case. Did you win that case?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so we have a victor in the Supreme Court named A.S. Haley, and we're going to talk about stuff that have to do with more national politics than church news, because church legal news can get real old real quick. If people have been paying attention to the news, there's a person within the IRS named Lois Lerner who's been accused of targeting conservative organization or PAC groups, which raise money for whatever conservative cause or liberal cause, and they can give that money to the candidates, or they can buy commercials or have influence. And the Supreme Court even recently said, we don't care how rich you are, we don't care whether you're a corporation. If you want to use your financial ability to affect an election, you're welcome to do that within certain structures. And so Lois Lerner and people around her put together an idea of how do we stop the 504(3)Cs from being able to raise money and affect the election. How do we protect President Obama? Now, there's an email trail, there's a memo trail, and lo and behold, she has pleaded the fifth. Now, we're going to get into some technicalities here. Pleading the fifth, contempt of the House, and how do we hold people accountable? Now, anybody who knows the history, recent history, the last 40 years, Nixon had trouble and some of his associates. Jimmy Carter and his associates had trouble. Ronald Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush 2, and Obama. Okay, so let's go through some of this, Alan. She has pleaded the fifth. What does that mean as far as a constitutional gift given to us from self-incrimination?
Yes, the Fifth Amendment says in part of its language that no person shall be forced to be a witness against himself. And so that is the protection, the so-called right of self-incrimination that the Fifth Amendment guarantees. And its use, however, is specified by the courts. In other words, you can't go chattering away that I'm not a crook, I didn't do it wrong, and this guy's telling lies about me, and then say, oops, I'm going to start pleading the fifth.
Well, and that's where we have the Miranda law. Miranda says you have the right to remain silent. If you don't, And it's the same.
It's open season.
It's
right.
open season, and the same applies to Lois Lerner. You can plead the fifth. If you don't plead the fifth, or start by making a statement, you've taken out your Miranda right.
And that's what she did the first time she appeared in front of Darrell East's government committee. She gave a long statement in which she refuted a number of assertions against her, and then when they started asking questions, she pled the Fifth Amendment. So there's an excellent argument that she has waived the Fifth Amendment. That's got to be tested, though, through this contempt process. And now it started in the committee with the vote this past week to hold her in contempt. That committee vote now gets referred to the full Congress, and John Boehner has said that Congress will vote on it probably next week. So you can, again, with the Republican majority in the House, expect that a full contempt citation will issue from the full House as a result of that vote. And now we get into the interesting part, the history of Congress's power of contempt. As I say, there's two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. They each are a separate legislative body with their own abilities to enforce testimony in front of them. And they issue a subpoena, and the subpoena means the witness has to come from wherever they are in the United States and come and appear before Congress and testify. And when they start testifying, but then try to take the fifth, Congress can say, no, you have waived the fifth, you have to keep testifying. When they say, no, I refuse to take the fifth, as she's done now in repeated appearances, then they can say, we're going to hold you in contempt. Now, what that means is historically, the House had a contempt procedure. It's inherent in its abilities as a legislative body. It sends out its marshal to arrest the person that has been held in contempt, brings them before the bar of the House, and then they're confined to a cell, to a jail cell that in the Capitol. I'm not sure exactly where it is or what the particulars are, but
well, that's because this doesn't happen that often.
No, the last time Congress used this particular procedure was, I understand, in the 1930s.
Marshall, yeah.
That must have been under Roosevelt. And so, in any event, that's one way Congress can do it. It can just do it itself and doesn't have to go through anybody else. It has its marshal. They go out and arrest the person. The other way that more recent times that has been far more frequently used is Congress gets this citation, or the House votes its contempt citation, and then refers that to the Department of Justice for it to prosecute through the courts. And it expects the Department of Justice, the prosecutor there, to serve the person with process, bring them before a judge. Well, yeah, right. There's some
okay, hold on here. I see a conflict of interest. So Eric Holder is going to hold Lois Lerner in contempt.
He'd have to prosecute her for contempt.
Yeah.
He's already got an investigation into this IRS thing. They appointed, as I understand it, one of Obama's major contributors to oversee the investigation. And lo and behold, they haven't found anything yet. Nothing's turned up. I wonder why. But so that will be the interesting part, yes, to see if Congress first gives Holder a chance to assign a prosecutor who will actually take Lois Lerner to court in front of a judge and have her found in contempt. The point is, this has to be adjudicated at some point by a judge as to whether she's actually waived the Fifth Amendment or not. So even if she were, under the first procedure, hauled back in front of the House and told she'd stay in jail until she could testifies, she could apply for a habeas corpus. It would go in front of a judge who would then listen and decide the issue as whether she's actually waived the Fifth Amendment or can still invoke it. And of course, if the court says, no, you haven't waived it, you can invoke it, then there's nothing the House can do to compel further testimony. Well, the interesting thing will be if the court finds that, no, she has waived it.
Well, what is the legal precedent on this?
Well, as I say, the whole purpose of this is to apply some leverage to the particular witness. What they would really like to have happen, of course, is for Lois Lerner to spill the beans as to any higher-ups that gave her instructions. Mm-hmm. And follow this up as high as it may go. And that's the interesting part here. So we're just at the ground floor of the jockeying back and forth in position of the parties to see who can get the most leverage.
Well, it's interesting because that was done in Iran-Contra and many different areas, is you offer somebody immunity.
Cap Weinberg, right.
And Weinberg got immunity then and said, listen, we're not going to, you won't go to jail. Some people are going to jail. Even back in the Nixon scandals, right. They offered people immunity, and some big people went to jail because they were able to get information from the person who's offered immunity.
Exactly.
And so that is a tool they use, But in this day and age of 24-hour news cycles and the media and the politicking and our Senate and our Congress and our president are not on the same page as to how to go forward.
Right. Well, it's about to get very interesting, as I say, when the House refers the citation to the Justice Department to see what the Justice Department does with it, because the House can then, if the Justice Department doesn't do anything with it, the House then can take matters into its own hands, as I said, and it'll have to go forward from there. And that will, of course, all come to a head just around the time of the fall elections. Isn't that interesting?
Yes, it is. Wait, I think I hear a black helicopter on your audio feed. Look outside, Alan. It is interesting. It's nice that we get to step away from church politics and just explain how screwed up the actual American polity and legal system is. It's very difficult to hold people accountable when they're in office. The Fifth Amendment's an oddity because, am I understanding correctly, it doesn't work in a grand jury situation?
No, you can't be compelled in any circumstances
to
testify against yourself. It applies everywhere. It's part of our Magna Carta tradition.
So it'll be interesting. Maybe we'll give a quick update in November to let people know exactly what cell Lois Lerner is in and how Eric Holder got her there. Very interesting stuff. Thank you, Alan.
Okay.
We're going to move on here to story 3, and story 3 is the war. And as Christians, we fight many wars because we have a big, vibrant enemy who seeks our death and destruction, and there's many ways to do it. And one of the wars we're fighting right now is the war with radical Islamists, the people who take Sharia law to its ultimate end, and that's to fight and kill the infidels, me being one of them. Now, this is a worldwide war. It's not just being fought in the streets of Ireland or in different parts of Africa. It's a war being fought on a global scale. Here we had the several bombings in New York related to Al-Qaeda and other factions of the Islamic trade, as I shall say. And it's something that we as Christianity have to address. Our brothers and sisters have to address this every day. Why isn't the primates of Africa sending out letters every time Catherine Jefferts Schori does something stupid, or Justin Welby is not right about his latest theology on same-sex marriage? Well, one of the reasons is they're fighting internal wars with Islamic fundamentalists. Let's start with some good news, George. Out of Zanzibar, we did not have a bombing at Easter.
Yes, we have friends who is the vicar of Zanzibar, the cathedral there, and they were worried because there was intelligence reports that the cathedral would be the target of a bomb attack. Mm-hmm. Earlier this year, there were some bombs set off outside the front of the cathedral, and they thought, there's an election coming up about whether Zanzibar break off from Tanzania, and there was fear that there would be a political attack on Easter. And it didn't happen. Good Easter in Zanzibar.
Good Easter in Zanzibar. Yet over the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've seen increasing violence in Nigeria. And it's one of those things where, you kill, if the Boko Haram kills 100 people, it doesn't make the news. And so they're trying new things. They did a bombing at a bus station, and then they did some kidnappings, George.
200 schoolgirls were taken from a boarding school, a government boarding school in the Northeast, and are being held. We don't know what's happened to them, but they've been taken off into the bush and are held by these Muslim fundamentalists. And when you're the Archbishop of Nigeria, what is a better use of your time, responding to an irrelevant Archbishop of Canterbury, or the real threat that members of your congregations are being murdered and kidnapped and are being subject to harassment by a murderous terrorist organization that wants to kill you? Justin Welby may bore you, but Boko Haram kills you.
They also get invited to Justin's installation, but that's another topic. Now, we live in this reality where Christianity has to fight this war. Now, how do we fight the war of Islamic radicalism? Certainly, we don't arm ourselves, but we need to start educating people about what it really is and what it really stands for and what its ultimate purpose is. Israel will be first to raise their hand and tell you exactly what Islam is out to do. It's out to wipe out Israel. Well, it's, Islamic fundamentalism is out to wipe out Western world and have fatahs and take on the people like me and you who believe in Jesus Christ. And that is their war. And we see small little arguments. What's this latest argument with the 9/11 museum?
Oh, the 9/11 Museum has created a little 9-minute film narrated by Brian Williams, the NBC News anchor, that talks about the roots of the attackers, and it mentions that these were Islamic fundamentalists. Mm-hmm. Well, the commission, being a government commission, had to add an interfaith consultation. And the Muslim imams on this group says, no, you can't say that these people are Muslims. They were terrorists, they were Saudis, but we really can't talk about jihad. And that's like sort of saying, well, when you talk about the concentration camps, you can say they're Nazis, but you can't call them Germans. There's a refusal to accept what is happening in our world today, either because of political correctness or cowardice. But politicians, and it's not just, I remember Condoleezza Rice, who was George Bush's Secretary of State, getting up and making a statement that Islam is a religion of love. No, Islam is a religion of submission.
Yes.
It is love. That's a Christian concept of God. And, from the Bush administration, the Obama administration, Barack Obama's administration have just been so utterly either ignorant or deliberately misstating the facts so as to not be seen as being somehow contrary to Islam.
Well, Islam can win this war just through us being so PC. Mm-hmm. One of the issues that we have is we want to respond in kindness. We want to say we understand your difficulties with us and stuff like that. But when we're arguing over the definition of jihad, you guys have a problem because we know what jihad stands for. And if I ask anybody who is Muslim in Africa what jihad stands for, they will tell me, and it will be the same definition, same in England. The only people who are arguing about it are the people who are trying to have a memorial for 9/11. And, but please, let us fight this war with transparency. And I think one of the things that Christians have to do is be transparent and honest about what radical Islamists want to do. They want to kill the infidels. And they get to define the infidels. They get to define how they are killed. And that is their way to get into heaven, is to take as many people with them. The way for a Christian to get to heaven is a little different. We are there to take people with us, but not with a suicide bomb. All right, this brings us to the end of episode 98. We're 2 away from 100. If you're surprised, we're more surprised that you would sit down every week and listen to Kevin and George talk about all things Anglican. Thank you so much. We are trying to raise money now to go to Assembly 2014. That's going to be held up by the somewhere near Pittsburgh. It's St. Vincent's Seminary. And we have been granted, Anglican TV has been granted exclusive rights to live stream the outcome of the conclave, the announcement of the new archbishop, all the special things that happen. And we will also hopefully be live streaming the assembly if they sold out all the tickets. I don't know the latest details on that, but George and I will be up there reporting for Anglican Unscripted, Anglican Inc., and Anglican TV, and we need your help. ACNA is not paying the way. They're not supposed to. This is press. So how can you help? You can go to anglican.tv/donate and donate to the cause. $25, $50, $100 helps us get up there. Fly George up from Florida, fly me over from here in Connecticut, and to spend almost 10 days in the Pittsburgh area is not going to be cheap. So please do what you can to help get us there. Now, if you're a ACNA bishop and you're likely to be elected, you probably want to donate too, because the coverage will be just incredible. But meander and meander we do. George, we've took Holy Week off, and you and I live crazy lives, and don't get to record as frequently as we need to be. Technically, we should probably be on episode 130 or 140 but by now, because we want to record this every week. What stops us from doing that, George?
Well, there are times when we just emotionally, physically, mentally just are not up to it. And we long ago made the decision we'd rather not put out a bad show than just put out something just to keep to a schedule. We want to maintain quality. I know that'll cause some people to snicker.
Quality? Ah!
Well, but we really need, we want to be relevant, pertinent, on the ball. We just don't want to become institutionalized. And also, for instance, for Holy Week, I live about 100 miles from my parish. Normally I spend only 2 or 3 days a week there because it's a part-time priest in charge. It's a small rural congregation. But this past week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I had 4 hours in the car each day. That's a little tiring. Yeah. Lots has been going on in my life. One of my daughters has a chronic illness, and it's flared up in recent weeks, and that's always very, very destructive emotionally when one of your children is sick, and you can't do anything about it. And we pray and we seek medical attention, but still we go forward, trusting that the Lord she's in her hand. She is in God's hands, and coupled with that, I've had all sorts of fun financial information. My credit card information was stolen. So somebody bought all these things on the internet, and I'm trying to get the money back. And Satan has a way of attacking you. As you're fighting over issues of health and all this and that, that's when financial issues, that's when the petty things come. That's when everything else seems to Comcast goes down for 2 days, just as I'm struggling to communicate with the bank and show them where the false charges are. I guess what I'm trying to say is you need to. I ask that you pray for us, because we've been going through things emotionally and personally and professionally, and we just ask that we be kept strong, and so that we can do the Lord's will in this work.
That is an interesting thing. It's very important for Satan to take us out of the picture, not because we're special, but because we're offering a voice of encouragement to the church. We offer news, we offer accountability to the church, and we offer a voice of hope that in the end of the day, the church will come through this. Anglicanism, Roman Catholicism, the church universal will win in the end of the day. But George and I are voices in this, and because of that, we're targets. And, George is going through a very difficult struggle the last 3 or 4 weeks in many different ways. I'll be less transparent. I, too, have gone through struggles. And, we need your prayers for this ministry to work. We're going to hit Anglican Unscripted episode 100 eventually, hopefully within 2 weeks. But we can't do that without your prayers. Now, I remember almost a year ago saying, send me an email if you want to sign up for the Anglican Unscripted prayer team. And about 4 or 5 of you sent emails, but I never followed up with you. Please resubscribe to be team prayer people for Anglican Unscripted. I will follow up next week with you, and we'll set a time that you can pray in unison for us.
And it's prayers not only for the issues that are affecting our lives, but, for instance, Kevin and I, when we first started discussing the Justin Welby topic that we did today, I had to pray very hard not to be mean and judgmental and avoid ridicule, because my immediate response was anger. And we don't film when I'm angry, because that's not how God wants us to use this ministry, to mouth off and give our opinions. Now, we may try to be clever, and we're not very always successful at that, but we should never be angry. We should never approach these things with hostility. And we need prayers so that we can see things in right perspective. And that's something that is just so important to us as individuals and to a ministry here, that God lead us in his ways, not in our emotions or feelings.
Well, we start every episode with prayer. One of the things that we want to do is be ensure that God is speaking through us, that this is not a Kevin agenda, it's not a George agenda, it's not a Peter agenda, it's not an Alan agenda, but Alan would probably have the best agenda. So we want to be sure that, in all of this, that God is working. And there have been so many times where we just stop. We're into our second story, and I'll say, George, we need to stop because it's not working. And George has said the same to Kevin. Kevin, you're off today. You got your Mr. Potato Head angry eyes on.
No. Now we have to be truthful. It's usually George who's off.
Yeah.
Kevin is more bubbly and energetic than I am.
Okay, I drink. And this has been sponsored by Dunkin' Donuts. Yes, I do have a little more energy sometimes. Now, but in that reality is the spiritual war that we fight. And obviously this closing's taking longer because it's a little bit behind the scenes. This show cannot work without you doing two things. First, yes, you have to watch us. Second, you have to pray for us. It would be really cool if you added Anglican Unscripted to the prayers of the people at your church or to some cycle of prayer, because this thing is growing and growing and getting bigger and bigger. We don't just serve Anglicans. We serve Lutherans, Methodists, Roman Catholics. It's a show that has grown beyond the bounds of anything that George and I ever imagined it would be, because it was never about us. It was always about something bigger. And we thank God for using us. We're very humble about that when we start the show. The humility doesn't always come across on the camera. But if there's any more two unworthy people in the world, we can't find them. You got them right here. Mr. Kevin Unworthy and George Unworthy. I'm Kevin Carlson.
And I'm George Conger. And you've been watching episode 98 of Anglican Unscripted.